They don't know the difference. At least, not in the way you think they do. When you imagine intimacy, you think of quiet moments, softness, safety, the ability to breathe, to lean in, to not fear what will come next. For the avoidant, that picture feels threatening, not because they don't crave it, but because their nervous system has been wired to believe that closeness equals danger. So instead, they look for something else. They seek out intensity, the spark, the drama, the fire that burns hot and fast. Because intensity feels powerful, it makes them feel alive. It creates a rush, a high that mimics connection, without requiring them to stay open for long. And this is where the confusion begins. Intensity is not intimacy, but to the avoidant, it feels close enough to trick the body, close enough to satisfy the craving, and close enough to keep real vulnerability at bay. You'll notice this if you've ever been with someone avoidant. They'll light up when things feel electric. They'll lean in when there's a chase. They'll respond when emotions run high. But when things become stable, gentle, predictable, that's when they start to back away. Because to them, safety doesn't feel safe. It feels boring. It feels suffocating. It feels like they're about to be swallowed whole. So they retreat, not always physically, but emotionally. They pull back, become cold, or hide behind silence. And you're left wondering, what changed? Nothing changed, except the atmosphere. Intensity faded, and what was left was intimacy. And for the avoidant, that's the scariest part. Because intimacy means being seen. It means being known. It means being vulnerable. And vulnerability feels like a trap. So they run back to what feels familiar. They chase chaos. They create conflict. They lean into temporary highs, just to escape the quiet terror of closeness. This is why so many relationships, with avoidantly attached people, swing like a pendulum. One moment, you're pulled in with passion. The next, you're pushed away with silence. It's not because they don't feel for you. It's not because they don't care. It's because they confuse the rush of intensity with the depth of intimacy. Intensity doesn't require staying. It doesn't require opening up. It doesn't require trust. But intimacy does. And that's why they fear it. If you've ever felt this, you're not alone. It's not about you being unworthy. It's about them not knowing the difference between fire and warmth. And until they learn, they'll always mistake one for the other. Because intensity feels thrilling, but intimacy feels dangerous. And to the avoidant, that difference changes everything. The allure of intensity. Intensity is seductive. It sweeps you in, takes your breath away, and convinces you that something profound is happening. For the avoidant, this is the perfect disguise. Because when things are intense, they don't have to be vulnerable. They don't have to sit in silence. They don't have to reveal the tender parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime protecting. Instead, the energy does the talking, the passion, the drama, the unpredictability. It all creates the illusion of closeness. But it's not closeness. It's proximity without safety. It's fire without warmth. It's love without roots. Think about it. The late-night arguments that end in passionate makeups, the hot and cold messages that keep you guessing, the sudden rush of attention, followed by days of withdrawal. This is intensity. It keeps you hooked. It keeps them hooked. Because neither of you has to settle into the stillness of real connection. And here's the truth. Intensity feels like intimacy to the avoidant. Because it's temporary. It rises, it peaks, and it crashes, which means it never requires them to stay open for long. They can show up, play the part, feel alive, and then retreat before it becomes too real. You might feel whiplash, but for them, This cycle feels familiar. It mirrors the rhythm of their early relationships. Love that came in bursts. Affection that showed up inconsistently. Connection that always had strings attached. So when you give them steady, gentle love, it doesn't register as safe. It registers as foreign. And the nervous system doesn't always welcome the unfamiliar. It craves what it knows. And what it knows is intensity. This is why many avoidants seek partners who ignite the fire. They're drawn to high energy, all or nothing connections. They gravitate toward people who can create the rush. But what happens when that fire starts to burn steady instead of wild? They panic, because if the fire doesn't burn, they're left with the warmth. And warmth feels like exposure. Warmth feels like vulnerability. Warmth feels like danger. So they stir things up. They distance. They withdraw. Or they provoke conflict, just to bring the fire back. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they don't know another way to feel connected without feeling trapped. And this is where partners often feel confused. You think intimacy should bring you closer, but to the avoidant, it pushes them away. You think intensity is exhausting, but to the avoidant, it feels like proof that love exists. And this is the heartbreak of it. They don't realize that what they're chasing isn't love. It's adrenaline. It's survival. It's a nervous system pattern, masquerading as connection. Intensity doesn't nurture. It doesn't sustain. It doesn't heal. But intimacy does. And until they can see that, they'll keep mistaking one for the other. They'll keep running toward the storm instead of the shelter. They'll keep chasing sparks instead of tending the fire. And you'll keep wondering why your love was never enough. But hear me on this. It was never about your love. It was about their wiring. And their wiring told them that intensity equals safety, while intimacy equals risk. Until that changes, the cycle continues. The fear beneath the fire. Behind every burst of intensity, there's fear. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal. Sometimes it looks like coldness. Sometimes it looks like anger. But beneath it, fear is always there. Fear of being seen. Fear of being known. Fear of being left. Fear of being not enough. This is the hidden engine that drives the avoidance confusion. Intensity feels safer because it distracts from the fear. It fills the silence. It drowns the doubt. It gives the nervous system something else to focus on, something sharp, something consuming, something urgent. But intimacy? Intimacy doesn't distract. It requires stillness. It requires being present. It requires facing yourself and another person at the very same time. For the avoidant, that's unbearable, because to be present with another means risking exposure. It means letting someone see not just the best parts, but the fragile parts, the rejected parts, the unwanted parts. And that's the very thing they've built their entire life avoiding. So when love begins to soften, when the connection starts to deepen, fear rises, and the body remembers. Love isn't safe. Closeness equals danger. Trusting equals pain. This memory is not always conscious. It lives in the nervous system. It lives in the body. It lives in the reflex to pull back. The moment someone steps closer, think of it like a reflex. If you touch a hot stove, your hand jerks away before you even think. That's how avoidants respond to intimacy. It's not logic. It's not choice. It's survival. And yet, here's the paradox. The very thing they long for most is intimacy. The very thing they need is safe connection. The very thing they dream about is love that doesn't leave. But when it shows up, their body doesn't recognize it as safe. It recognizes it as a threat. So the fear beneath the fire isn't just fear of you. It's fear of themselves, fear of their own longing, fear of their own need, fear of their own heart. Because if they admit they need love, they also admit they can lose it. If they admit they want closeness, they also admit they can be abandoned. If they admit they care deeply, they also admit they can be hurt. And to someone who has spent a lifetime building walls of self-protection, this feels like suicide. So what do? They turn intimacy into intensity. Instead of talking, they argue. Instead of opening up, they pull away. Instead of letting you see their fears, they provoke yours. Instead of resting in love, they chase the high of drama. Because drama feels powerful. Drama feels alive. Drama feels safer than silence. In silence, you might ask them to speak. In stillness, you might ask them to stay. In safety, you might see the child inside them, who never felt safe. And that is the ultimate fear, because the avoidant has trained themselves to hide that child so well, they don't even know how to access it anymore. So if you come too close, if you sit too still, if you love too gently, you trigger the very thing they are desperate to avoid: exposure. This is why arguments can erupt out of nowhere, why they can vanish after a beautiful weekend together, why they can seem warm one moment and ice cold the next. It's not always about you. It's about the fear beneath the fire. And here's the painful irony. Every time they run, every time they withdraw, every time they confuse intensity for intimacy, they reinforce the very loneliness they're so afraid of. They protect themselves from hurt, but they also protect themselves from love. They escape rejection, but they also escape belonging. They avoid pain, but they also avoid healing. And this cycle continues, not because they don't care about you, but because fear feels more real than love. Love requires trust. Fear requires nothing. Love asks you to lean in. Fear commands you to step back. Love opens. Fear closes. And when the nervous system is trained to survive, fear always wins. Unless something changes. Unless the avoidant learns to sit in the stillness without running, to feel the fear without obeying it, to risk exposure instead of hiding behind fire. This is not easy. It's terrifying. It's messy. It feels impossible at first, but it's also the only way forward. Because intensity can thrill you, but it cannot hold you. It can ignite passion, but it cannot build safety. It can make you feel alive, but it cannot make you feel at home. Only intimacy can do that. And that's the truth the avoidant is secretly terrified to face. The fear beneath the fire is not just about losing you. It's about losing the self they've spent a lifetime protecting. And until they're willing to let that self be seen, they will keep confusing intensity for intimacy. When love feels like a trap, for most people, love feels like freedom, a place to rest, a place to be known, a place to exhale. But for the avoidant, love doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a trap. It feels like expectations tightening. It feels like obligations piling up. It feels like someone watching too closely, asking too much, moving too near. This isn't because they don't want love. It's because love was never safe in the past. Love was conditional. Love was inconsistent. Love came with strings attached. Love came with silence, with absence, with rejection. So their nervous system learned early. Love means danger. Love means pain. Love means I can't breathe. That memory doesn't disappear with age. It doesn't vanish with logic. It doesn't fade just because someone good enters their life. It lives in the body. It lives in the tightening of the chest. When someone says, I need you, it lives in the panic. When someone asks for closeness, they don't know how to give. It lives in the sudden urge to run when things finally feel too good. And so, the trap begins. Not because love itself is the trap, but because their body believes it is. This is why avoidants often say things like, I need space. I don't know what I want. It feels like too much. Because inside, they are suffocating. Even if you're not pressuring them, even if you're gentle, even if you're patient, their body has decided that love equals being trapped. So they run toward intensity instead. Intensity feels like control. It feels like a fire you can start and just as easily put out. It feels like something on their terms. It feels alive, without feeling trapped. But intimacy? Intimacy asks them to stay, to remain, to trust, to sit with the discomfort of being seen, and not escape. That's where the fear explodes. Because staying still in love feels like being caged. It feels like losing themselves. It feels like disappearing into someone else's needs. And that is their deepest terror. The avoidance entire defense system is built on preserving their independence, their autonomy, their right to pull away when things feel overwhelming. So when someone they care about comes closer with love, their body screams, I'll lose myself here. I'll suffocate here. I'll get swallowed whole. Even if it's not true, their nervous system doesn't know the difference. It only knows survival. And survival says, run. But here's the heartbreaking part. They don't want to run. Not really. They want to stay. They want to belong. They want to rest in the arms of someone safe. But every fiber of their being is wired for escape. So they create distance. They stir conflict. They act cold. They withdraw. Not because they don't love you, but because love feels like a trap. And in that withdrawal, they reinforce their own loneliness. They confirm their own story. See, I can't be close. See, love always smothers. See, I'm better off alone. But loneliness isn't freedom. It just feels safer. And so, the cycle repeats. Intensity gives them a taste of closeness, without the risk of staying. Drama gives them the illusion of connection, without the vulnerability of rest. Arguments give them a reason to pull away, without admitting they're afraid. It's safer to fight than to be still. It's safer to run than to be held. It's safer to confuse fire with warmth than to risk the terrifying safety of love. And so, the trap deepens. But here's the truth the avoidant rarely admits, not even to themselves. They don't actually want the fire. They want the warmth. They don't want the chaos. They want the peace. They don't want to keep running. They want to come home. But the only way to come home is to face the fear, to recognize that the trap isn't love. The trap is their memory of love. The trap is their body's reflex. The trap is the past still alive in the present. When they confuse intensity for intimacy, they're not just protecting themselves from you. They're protecting themselves, from the grief they've buried, from the child they've silenced, from the longing they've denied. Because true intimacy would awaken all of that, and that feels unbearable. So when love feels like a trap, they keep choosing the fire, but the fire always burns out. And when it does, they are left alone in the ashes, still longing for the warmth they keep running from, the path back to real intimacy. If intensity keeps them running in circles, what breaks the cycle? What turns fire into warmth? What turns distance into closeness? What turns fear into safety? The answer is not force. It's not pressure. It's not convincing them to stay. Because the avoidant cannot be chased into intimacy. They cannot be lectured into closeness. They cannot be guilt into vulnerability. All of that just makes them run faster. All of that just proves their fear true. See? Love demands too much. See? Love suffocates. See? Love is a trap. The path back to intimacy is slower, softer, gentler. It begins with one thing. The avoidant has never truly known safety. Safety in love. Safety in being seen. Safety in being needed. Without being swallowed whole. Because deep down, what they fear isn't intimacy itself. It's the loss of themselves within intimacy. So the first step is proving, again and again, you don't have to disappear here. You don't have to perform here. You don't have to run here. This is where intensity and intimacy finally diverge. Intensity thrives on urgency, on highs and lows, on quick sparks and sudden flames. Intimacy thrives on consistency, on slow presence, on the quiet, unremarkable moments that accumulate into trust. And that's terrifying for the avoidant. Because consistency is foreign, stillness is foreign, gentle presence feels suspicious. It feels too good to be true. So at first, they will test it. They will push away. They will create conflict. They will stir the fire again. Not because they don't care, but because they're asking a silent question. Will you stay if I run? Will you disappear if I push? Will you prove me right? That love always abandons. This is why intimacy with an avoidant requires patience, not blind tolerance, but patience paired with boundaries. Because safety doesn't mean smothering them, and it doesn't mean waiting forever. It means showing them that love can breathe, that love can expand and contract, that love can stretch without snapping, that love can give space without losing connection. This is the paradox that heals. The more room they are given, the less they feel the need to run, the more freedom they are offered, the safer they feel to come closer, the more they are shown that they won't be trapped, the more they realize they can stay. But this doesn't just happen in romance. It happens in friendships, in families, in every place they've learned to equate closeness with danger. Healing the avoidant pattern means reteaching the nervous system. It means teaching the body that stillness is safe, that quiet connection is safe, that love doesn't demand performance, that love doesn't erase individuality, that love doesn't suffocate. It liberates. And slowly, something shifts. They stop confusing intensity for intimacy. They stop chasing fire and start resting in warmth. They stop running from closeness and start allowing it in. It won't be a straight line. There will be steps forward and steps back. There will be moments of retreat and moments of return. But every time they come back, every time they allow themselves to stay, a new pathway is built, a new story is written, a new truth is learned. Love isn't a trap. Love is freedom. Because intimacy, real intimacy, isn't about losing yourself. It's about being more yourself than you've ever been. It's not about shrinking. It's about expanding. It's not about suffocating. It's about breathing deeper. It's not about control. It's about surrender, not to another person's power, but to the truth that you are safe to be seen. This is what the avoidant truly longs for. Not the highs of intensity, not the drama of chaos, not the safety of distance, but the steady rhythm of love that doesn't demand they disappear. The kind of love that says, you can be you here, and I will still stay. That is the healing. That is the freedom. That is the intimacy they've been running from all along. And maybe, if you've loved an avoidant, you've seen glimpses of this. The way their guard drops for a second, the way their eyes soften, the way they almost reach back before pulling away again. That's the truth inside them, fighting to break through. They don't want the fire. They want the warmth. They don't want to keep running. They want to rest. They don't want to be trapped. They want to be free. And freedom is not found in escape. It's found in love. So if you've ever wondered why avoidants confuse intensity for intimacy, remember this. Intensity is survival. Intimacy is healing. Intensity is the fire they know. Intimacy is the warmth they crave. Intensity is temporary. Intimacy is eternal. They run to intensity because it feels familiar, but they return to intimacy because it feels like home. And home is what they've been searching for all along. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the truth is, we all long for intimacy. We all long for safety. We all long for a love that lets us breathe. And sometimes, just knowing we're not alone in that is the first step home.